I kind of feel I've talked to death about the fact that House of the Dragon Season 2 was very divisive among fans, and there's still a lot of negativity from both sides of the argument about it going into Season 3 this June. With this video, I want to take a look at some of the events I'm really looking forward to seeing on screen in live action in Season 3, and some show-only plots that do actually have my attention. One of the huge issues with Season 2 was the last-minute call by HBO to cut the episode count down to 8 rather than 10. It really threw off the timeline for the writing and pushed events like the Gullet into Season 3, which should have been where Season 2 concluded. While I'm not thrilled by the fact that Season 3 will also only have 8 episodes, because it's going to be a hell of a job to cram it all in, at least going into writing Season 3, Ryan Condal and the writers knew what they were working with this time round. But regardless, fitting what's left to cover in the Dance of the Dragons into 16 episodes is a monolithic task, and we cannot say for certain how much of the book will actually make it into House of the Dragon. And of course, we also have to consider the butterfly effect of the changes Ryan Condal and co have already made to the narrative in Season 2. Right now, we're sort of in this grey area, but even so, that doesn't mean you still can't look forward to aspects of it. Now, for this first part of this video, I'm just going to focus on book content we know we're going to be getting to some degree this season. The show was always going to have a tough time with Season 3 with how much they were already going to have to stretch the budget, having to open the season with a huge battle like the Gullet, and of course we can't also ignore the fall of King's Landing, which will only compound that issue further. It's become clear from the trailers we've seen so far they are compressing the timeline between the Gullet and the fall of King's Landing. While they won't happen exactly at the same time, it seems likely they will happen relatively close together, perhaps even in the same episode. It's also clear the fall of King's Landing and the Gullet will be markedly changed. Namely, it seems that Baela will be part of the Battle of the Gullet, which I guess narratively makes sense, given how different her character has been in the show up till now. Her not being part of the battle would kind of be a bit odd. There's also a bit of a debate going on at the moment as to if Rhaena and Sheepstealer will also be part of the Gullet, perhaps with some glimpses of them in the trailer, but for me the jury's still out. We also know the context the fall of King's Landing is going to be very different than in the book, with Alicent in the show parts of it and allowing it to happen. I don't expect to see fighting at the gates of King's Landing or the Gold Cloaks switching sides. I think simply the fall will be a few shots of dragons around the Red Keep, like this famous piece of art on the screen right now from Rise of the Dragon, with the dragons landing in the Red Keep, with Rhaenyra going straight to the throne room, with some fighting between Daemon and some of the guardsmen left behind. This is an expedited version of the fall, but I think much of the focus of it will not be on the fall itself, but rather the fact that Alicent and Rhaenyra's plan hasn't worked, given that Aegon is already missing. The tension will come in the form of Rhaenyra wondering if Alicent is actually telling the truth or not. There does seem to be some shots of Alicent and Helaena trying to flee the Red Keep in the trailer, so maybe when Alicent learns that Aegon is gone and Aemond is being Aemond, she does try and flee but is caught in the process. From what I've seen of the Gullet in the trailers, it does kind of seem like how I pictured it in the book. For some reason in my head, I always thought it would happen not exactly at night, but maybe like really early morning. This is actually one of those situations I wish the dragons were a bit more book accurate and had all different coloured flames. I think it would make it so much more visually dynamic, but it's a really small issue. The issue with the Gullet isn't just the dragon aspect, which is costly in terms of CGI, but shooting sea battles themselves are a huge undertaking as it is. They take twice as long to shoot as a normal battle, and are so much more technically difficult to physically film. Even the post-production is so much more expensive, with nearly every line of dialogue having to be redubbed in ADR. But we know that they spent weeks filming the Gullet, so my guess is they funneled as many resources into it as they physically can. They know this battle has been hyped up and they need to nail it, or they could lose a large chunk of the audience very quickly, especially so early in the season. Regardless of the issues, if it's anything like the book, then the Gullet could maybe be the single best battle House of the Dragon ever does. It has lots of action, both on land and sea. dragons and drama with some huge deaths that leave a hell of an impact on so many of the characters' narratives. There's also a land battle element to the Gullet, with the sack of Driftmark. I suspect this will play a very small role in the show, with maybe 1 or 2 cuts away and some dialogue about it after the fact, just to give an idea of what's going on. I do wonder how the Prince Aegon and Viserys element is going to fit into all of this, and if they're going to try and fit the gay abandon into this sequence somehow. I guess if Rhaena and Sheepstealer are in fact in the battle, the presence of Aegon and Viserys on the gay abandon makes a little bit more sense. Given the ages of the children in the show, however, really does have me wondering how this is physically going to play out. The book version simply just is not possible. There are quite a few events that I hope we see in Season 3, but the reality is they will either be very stripped back or merged into other events. For example, early in Season 3 we should be getting the Battle of the Honeywine, which is really where Daeron Targaryen, Daeron the Daring, should be introduced into the story, saving the day on his dragon, and being knighted for his valour. It's a really cool, quite small-scale battle. While yes, it is narratively important, it is quite small in scope, and makes it a risk of being cut. However, I think we should look to Season 2 and how the writers decided to show some of the other smaller-scale battles, such as the Honeywine. I'm of course talking about how they handled the Battle of the Burning Mill, where we saw its instigation and the bloody aftermath. Yeah, I was disappointed not to get it, it's one of my favourite minor battles, but I understand the logic as to why they took this approach. While I would of course much rather see a full-scale Battle of the Honeywine, practically speaking in terms of budget and fitting the battle into an already packed narrative in episode 1 or 2 with the Gullet and the Fall, this approach does seem like a solid compromise. We then had the likes of the Battle of the Red Fork, which like the Honeywine is one of the smaller scale battles of the dance, but an important one, given it directly sets up the battle by the lakeshore, aka the Fishfeed. The battle is very much as its name suggests, a battle between the Lannisters and the Western forces as they try and cross the Red Fork of the Trident, being attacked by the Riverlords, now loyal to Rhaenyra. It's quite a chaotic battle, with the Lannisters having literal lions in their ranks in the TV show, setting up some crazy possibilities. Some key players in the war die in this battle, and it shapes and sets up events to come. The battle this sets up is the Battle by the Lakeshore, also known as the Fishfeed. Arguably one of the single bloodiest and most horrific battles of the dance. The Lannister forces are harried across the Riverlands until they are trapped on the northeastern shore of the God's Eye by the combined forces of the Riverlords and the Winter Wolves, commanded by Roddy the Ruin. They are massively outnumbered, and despite Harrenhal not being that far away, have no real chance of victory or escape without the support of Aemond and Criston Cole. The trouble is, all their ravens keep getting shot down and they can't get word back to Harrenhal. Thousands of Lannister men die, either killed by their own foe or drowned in the lake, as the Lannister line is pushed further and further back. It's really horrific. I know some fans are worried that the Fishfeed is going to get cut, but I really don't see it happening. It's too much of a key point in forcing Aemond and Criston Cole's hand somewhat at Harrenhal. It kinda impacts quite a few events to come, such as the Butcher's Ball, and to some extent as well, Tumbleton. But here's the thing, I don't think we get both the Red Fork and the Fishfeed. I suspect they might merge some key elements of the Red Fork and the Fishfeed together. Maybe they could have the Lannister army be harried across the Riverlands still, with them still being trapped at the shores of the God's Eye, and have key figures that were killed in the Red Fork killed in the Fishfeed instead. While of course I would miss the Red Fork, I do think merging these events makes a hell of a lot of sense, and doesn't really change the narrative too much. It would allow more resources to be put into the Fishfeed itself, which I hope would mean we'd get to see the full true scale of the horror of the events. Daemon Targaryen is going to be a bit of a wildcard here. It seems from the trailer that he might be playing a more active role in the Riverlands. Maybe not fighting in the Fishfeed itself, but maybe in the harrying of the Lannister march across the Riverlands. While the trailer implies Daemon plays a role in the Riverlands, this could just be the way it's been edited. I'm not really sure what they're doing with Daemon here, and I don't really know what to expect. I sadly think anything to do with Dalton Greyjoy, the Red Kraken, is either going to happen completely off screen, or have very minimal screen time, or be cut altogether. From what I can tell, we've had little to no news about it. It doesn't really impact the Dance of the Dragons directly that much, and more so sets up the playing board for the Hour of the Wolf and the early years of the Regency, which I sadly think will be beyond the scope of House of the Dragon. So why would they dedicate the limited resources to it if this is the case? I think we may, for example, hear of raids on Lannisport by the Ironborn, but I doubt we'll really see much of it on screen. It's kind of a shame, as Lady Joanne Lannister is a really cool character. According to some sources, she donned mail and a sword to lead the remaining Lannister forces in the struggle to drive the Ironborn from the Westerlands, and she took an active role in the defence of the West, and even after the dance, would take the fight directly to the Ironborn themselves, leading the attack on Pike. So it's a real shame I don't think we'll be seeing her on screen in this capacity. I could maybe see some version of her in Season 4, as perhaps the Lannister representation during the Hour of the Wolf, but that would be beyond the scope for this video. There is still part of me that wonders if they ever intended to do any of the Regency stuff on TV, that they might still include Dalton Greyjoy, given the role he plays in the story. I guess this is definitely one of those events we just have to wait and see, but from what we've seen, Dalton is looking unlikely. Now, it's kind of hard to guess where Season 3 is exactly going to end in the timeline, because of how much the timelines actually shifted and moved about during the adaptation process. But from the trailer and set leaks, it does seem we are getting some version of the Butcher's Ball in Season 3. I think it would really be quite compelling if they are indeed expanding Criston Cole's doomed march from Harrenhal to the Reach, and spend more time with some of the crazy and weird stuff that happens on that march, with all the well planned out ambushes, like the dead bodies displayed as if they were having a feast. There's really so many cool things they could do with this. This does actually track with what we've been seeing from Criston Cole in Season 2, and in both trailers of the Season 3. With the whole PTSD arc they seem to be building for Criston. If they do the Butcher's Ball in Season 3, I suspect they could make it a much smaller scale thing, and focus more directly on Criston's interaction with the Riverlords, rather than the army as a whole. At the end of the day, Criston Cole is the heart of the Butcher's Ball, and will be the narrative focus given it's the completion of his whole arc. I really hope they do stick to the books with it. I know it's rare for the show to do this, especially House of the Dragon, but this section of Fire and Blood has some absolutely fantastic dialogue. The scene really writes itself. I really just hope they don't pull any of the history was written by the Maesters, they didn't really record what happened, or it was green propaganda excuses that the writers seem to fall back on so much. I suspect the first Battle of Tumbleton might be the final set-piece battle of Season 3. It's big, it's bloody, it has dragons, but also has some huge plot twists with the betrayal. You have this really interesting situation with Tumbleton, where you have this Hightower army sieging the town, with the Winter Wolves and Riverlords holding it, and actually sallying out the back gate to face the Hightowers. It's not really something we've seen on Game of Thrones before. However, from what we've seen from set leaks and trailers, Tumbleton in the show is going to be drastically different. Some elements of it have to be the same, such as the betrayal, but there is some speculation based on set leaks that suggest it could be the opposite, with the Greens defending and the Blacks attacking. But by far the biggest change is the fact Daemon Targaryen will be at Tumbleton. I kinda get why they have added him, given the complaints about his slow-paced story in Season 2, and I do think whatever they do with it is going to be visually exciting and cool. But there's so much about adding Daemon that just doesn't make sense narratively. Why is he not fighting on Dragonback? Why would he run away when the betrayal happens? Surely he would stay and fight. So while I am skeptical, I am waiting to see how they actually implement this. I think what really stands out to me about the first Tumbleton is the sheer brutality of how the town was sacked after the battle. We've seen lots of battles in the TV shows, but thus far, we've not really seen the true horror of a town being utterly sacked and ravaged by an attacking force. I guess yes, you do have Daenerys burning King's Landing in Season 8 of Game of Thrones, but that was so out of nowhere and so poorly handled, you can't really absorb the horror of it as it was happening, as I was left scratching my head at the other questionable choices the show had made. They have an opportunity to do something really shocking and powerful with the sack of Tumbleton, and I really hope they don't shy away from really showing the horror of war, which is kind of what George R. R. Martin's always trying to get across in his stories, with the War of the Five Kings and the Dance of the Dragons. I'm really looking forward to Aemond at Harrenhal this season. I might have been one of the few who actually liked Daemon's Harrenhal arc in Season 2. Yeah, I think he had too many visions and it went on too long, but I love delving into the more magical and mystical parts of Westeros that Game of Thrones really neglected. As someone who loves the deep lore of Daemon's weirwood visions, and seeing the Green Men was amazing. While none of this was actually book stuff, I can totally see something like this having happened to Daemon in the book. I suspect Aemond will get the same treatment by Alice Rivers, but as we know from the book, their relationship is a lot more complex, and I can't wait to see how it develops on screen. I do worry, because of the wide audience reaction to Harrenhal last season, they might hold back a bit with Aemond. But I hope it's not the case, because the relationship between Alice and Aemond, for me, is very compelling. I just hope the weirwood visions, like Daemon's last season, all have a point to them, and isn't just random filler. I can't help but think both Daemon and Aemond's visions will play a role in the battle above the God's Eye. During this time period in the books that Season 3 is going to be covering, Aegon just goes MIA till the very end of the war. It proves to be a really good plot twist in the book. However, it's clear the show needs to give him something to do this season, and I'm keen to see how they're going to tell the story of how he actually gets to Dragonstone. It's a shame they won't preserve the plot twist, but it makes sense narratively why they made this choice. Helaena is also going to be one to watch out for. There's very little of her book plot left to cover, and with the butterfly effects of Maelor being cut from the show, I do wonder how they're going to reconcile Helaena in the TV show with where she ends up narratively for the story to function. There's some really strange things with her in the trailer, such as the birthing scene. So something tells me they might be leaning heavily into her dragon dreams and visions. I'm just wondering how they're going to handle her fate. Are we going to get answers as to what really happened to her? Or will Ryan Condal keep an air of mystery about it, where we're left wondering what really happened? While I don't think Rhaenyra is going to go full on Maegor with teats as in the book, simply given how Ryan Condal has written her character thus far, I do expect we will see some version of it, but perhaps framing her descent into madness and mental illness more sympathetically than Fire and Blood. While I would much rather have the book version, as I think her dark side is what makes Rhaenyra such a compelling character. I hope we do get to see Emma Darcy given something really morally challenging to do. That is wholly Rhaenyra's responsibility, and not something she can blame on anyone else. For example, much of Rhaenyra's fault for blood and cheese is kind of passed off onto Daemon. Like I said, I don't think we're going to get full-on Maegor with teats, but the trailer is suggesting we're going to get some very compelling stuff with Rhaenyra in Season 3. I've not hidden the fact that I was disappointed with Season 2 of House of the Dragon, and I would much rather them have stuck closely to George's writing. I've just come to accept, much like Game of Thrones, the show is what it is. It's very much doing its own thing, and I'm trying to embrace that fact. As I've tried to demonstrate with this video, there's still some really compelling stuff that I'm really looking forward to seeing in Season 3. And while I might not like the whole package, and there might still be some things that leave a sour taste, I'm willing to go into Season 3 with an open mind, in the hopes that the lessons have been learned from some of the errors made with the writing of Season 2.